All right, good morning or good afternoon. Today we're going to do a crash course in livestock evaluation. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the traits that we're going to be looking at when we look at a class of livestock, whether that's market lambs, market steers, or market swine or hogs. There's a particular order that we really want to be placing when we're looking at market animals. And then we'll be talking a little bit about breeding animals tomorrow. Okay. So when we're evaluating a market animal, here are the traits that we're looking at. First and foremost, we're looking at degree of muscle. Now, the reason this is our most important trait is because when we're looking at a market animal, this is an animal that's going to go to harvest, and that muscle expression, or the size of those muscles, is what corresponds to the cuts of meat that we get. So if we have an animal that has higher muscling or larger muscles, we're typically going to get more money because we have more product coming off of that animal. Okay, the next thing we're going to be looking at is degree of finish. Now, when I talk about finish, what I mean by that is fat coverage on an animal. Okay, on lambs, we're going to call that finishing. So you're going to hear it the most. We'll talk a lot about handling it. With lambs, we'll get to handle and actually feel and estimate our degree of finish. We won't be able to handle with steers and with market hogs, but we'll be able to look at the different places in that animal that we'll be evaluating about how much finish we think they have just visually. Third, we're looking at overall balance and style of an animal. Then we're going to look at frame size. So just genuinely, you're looking at a class of animals, which one is genuinely the largest and which one is the smallest. And then we're going to talk about soundness and structural correctness. And this is all about alignment, how that animal tracks or walks, placement of legs and feet, whether they're going to be cow-hocked, whether they splay out or toe out up front, whether they are bow-legged behind. With steers, we're going to look at a little bit of tracking, the way that they move, all about that soundness. Now, these bottom three traits, we're going to be looking at a lot more when we look at breeding animals. When we have breeding animals, we really don't care about muscling. We like to look at the balance and frame size because partly if we're breeding to get market animals, then we want traits that are going to allow for a lot of potential to put on muscle, so we want big animals. But particularly when we're looking at breeding gilts, heifers or cows, and ewes, we want something that's got a deep body, big barrel, something that's a large size. It's going to have an easy time carrying offspring. And soundness and structural correctness is really important because throughout a pregnancy or throughout a gestation, without that soundness, that animal will be under stress, will not be able to keep on weight, will not be able to perform well. So here are our 5 traits for market animals, but those first 2 are what are really unique to our market animals: muscling and finish. Okay. So we're going to look at some examples here. If we're talking about muscling first, take a minute and look at these 4 rear views of a market lamb class and think about which one from the back has the most muscling. How can you tell? So the first thing that I'm looking at when I look at a class of lambs from a rear view is the width between their back legs. Okay? This is going to give us what we can evaluate as a leg score, or the amount of muscle that's filling in between those back legs. So the 2 lambs that are the most heaviest muscled are 1 and 3, those 2 lambs on the left. We can see that 2 and 4 both have a muscle in that back leg in the lower third of that leg that sort of tapers down into a little bit more of a funnel, whereas that place between their legs, right where that muscle starts to end, carries down the furthest in 1 and 3, and basically is the flattest across the bottom. right? So we have the most muscle expression in those left lambs. As we look at a class of market steers, part of what we're looking for is I'm looking a little bit at that rear. I'm looking at the shape of that rump. So I'm seeing a good bit of muscle expression really in that center pair. I think in 2 and 3. But then when we start to look at things like degree of finish, like I said, we won't be able to handle steers. What we're going to look for is the flank, which is that area where their hip or their back leg meets their their bottom line, okay, or meets their body. It's that sort of flap of skin, and that's going to be one clear indicator of degree of finish, of how much fat coverage there is there. And I think that that center pair is also winning there. What we don't want to see is we don't want to see a flank that's tight or sucked up. That degree of finish, when we're talking about a market animal, is going to correlate a lot to flavor, right? So if you buy a steak that has too much fat on it, we might be losing a little bit of product because we're not necessarily eating all of that. But what a lot of that corresponds to is fat that actually ends up in the muscle. If we think we have a lot of cover fat, we assume that we're going to have quite a bit of intermuscular fat, which is also called marbling, and that's what makes our steaks nice and tender and flavorful. Okay, and last but not least, we're going to look at a rear view of some market hogs. And in my mind, these are placed fairly in order. I would say the market hog on the right is clearly the most expressively muscled. We can see they stand nice and wide behind, wider stifled, which means that distance from side to side on that rear view, right across the center of their butt, basically. That number 2, that center hog is a little bit flatter muscled, a little bit narrower, and you see it stands narrower. And then that number 1, we really is almost straight down their sides as you go from the top of their body down their leg. Really the only expression that I'm seeing there is quite a bit more fat. Okay, so we don't want too much finish. There is such a thing. All right, so we've had a very brief overview of what we're looking for when we're evaluating a market class of animals. What we're going to do now is you're going to follow the link on your worksheet to watch a video of a class of market lambs. You're going to get to see the lambs move, you'll get to see a rear view, you should see a profile, and you should see a front view. And remember, what you're looking for is muscling first, and then we're looking to see where we find degree of finish. And then you're going to write a set of reasons. Okay, and in your reasons, there's a outline that you can use on your worksheet. You're basically going to talk your pairs. You'll start with saying, I like this class of market lambs 1, 2, 3, 4, if that's the number that you like them in order of. Start with your absolute best lamb, end with your absolute worst. And each sort of paragraph for each component of your reasons is going to be saying why you like your top over your second. In your middle pair, you'll talk why you like your second over your third. And in your last part, you'll talk about why you like your fourth over, or your third over your fourth. So I like the class of market lambs 1, 2, 3, 4. I started the most muscular lamb that best combined degree of finish with potential carcass merit. Ideally, it could be a little longer from the 13th rib back, but in a top pair, I still like it over 2. Now in my middle pair, I like 2 over 3 because 2 stood wider behind and clearly had better muscle expression and degree of finish over its top. I appreciate that 3 was longer bodied, but still it shelved off over its top and washed out through its loin, showing less finish, so it's third. In my bottom pair, I like 3 over 4, as 3 was a longer bodied, better made, more balanced lamb, However, and while 4 was fairly finished, it was structurally incorrect, had absolutely no muscle expression, and lacked balance, so it's last. Thank you. So I just kind of made those up on the spot off of a class that I'm not actually looking at. What we're going to do is you're going to look at the class in the video, you're going to take notes, and then you're going to fill out that set of reasons and bring them in with you tomorrow when you start class. Thank you.